Well, good afternoon, councillors and staff. Welcome to the ordinary meeting of the Planning and Regulatory Committee. It's 1 o'clock. We'll get underway. Welcome to Cassie and Ruby, our youth councillors. Great to see you again. Ruby, have you been to one of these committees before? You'll enjoy it. We'll get underway. First thing we'll call for any apologies. Do you have any apologies? I'm not aware of any at the moment. Do know that Ms Barton, who normally sits here, is away at a planning conference, as is Ms Bishop. Any points? So at the moment we'll just carry on. Confirmation of order of business. As per the agenda, there are no changes. Meeting's being live streamed on the council's YouTube channel, so we'll need to turn on our microphones so you can be heard. And if any changes, the recommendations will be up here on the overhead. If any changes, they'll be also recorded on the other projector. No requests for public forum, and any members who need to identify their interest can do that at the appropriate time in the agenda. And just a reminder, keep the update of the interest register up to date. Right, a confirmation of the minutes of the meeting of the 21st of February have been in your minutes. It's been moved as a true and correct record. Seconded, Councillor Delberg. Any discussion? I'll put it. Those in favour will say aye. Aye. Against? Carried. Chairperson's report. I do not have a chairperson's report, written or verbal, so we'll move on to item 7, the State of the Environment report. I'd like to invite up to Dr Fisher. And Mr Hill. Mr Bouncy. These are all chairs. Take it the report's been read, as well as the State of the Environment report, but is there any matters you wish to highlight or amplify, or any changes or amendments?
No, thank you. Through the chair.
Must admit it was a report I did enjoy reading. Okay, any questions of the officers? Councillor Delberg.
Yeah, thanks, Mr Chair. Page 17, 5.9, and your grid there on the home composting. What's the margin for error on that? Page 17. Uh, 5.91.
Through the chair, in terms of the table, that's from a survey, so I can't really answer that question myself, actually. So it's something that we'll have to come back to you on at a future date to provide you the details of that.
Okay, cool.
Might be able to assist with that one.
I think it's in the high fours. I think it's about 4.8, 4.9% was the margin of error on that survey, on a survey of that size.
You just following up on that, it's just when there's such a, you're sort of trying to get a trend there, and there's not a lot of difference between those numbers. 68 to 64, that's probably the margin for error anyway. So it's kind of hard to get a trend on that. That's why I asked that question. I've got some questions for the report itself, but
keep going if you wish.
I'm happy that other people deal with that one. I'll work my way through the report.
Okay. Yeah, the questions from officers? I've got mainly on the water quality, when you talked about the degradation of the water quality, and I think it was the 7 streams there. The one that's that doesn't seem to be related to forestry is Orphanage Creek. Any indication of the drivers of the degradation of that particular catchment?
Through the chair, in all of the sites, actually, most of the issues are actually through the actual change in land use. So in Orphanage Creek, so some of the issues there include sedimentation, and in the middle of the catchments there's obviously we're starting to get housing through there, and there's also farming in the upper catchment as well. So in actually previous years, there were issues in terms of livestock were quite close to the stream, so E. coli, but that's through the riparian planting programme that the council's had, and the cattle's been moved back. That's one of the benefits of building houses, that you lose kind of grazing area close to the stream. So as I said, really in response, the main issue is through changing land use, really, and what's the dominant land use there.
Good to know. Oh, back to you, Councillor Dolberg. No.
Page 55. So I'm into the actual document itself, the report. And I was interested in that bottom paragraph on page 55 of ours, or 35 of your report. And it just says the harvesting in the 5 years following the harvest as new plants are established. That's basically the problem with the sediment and the nitrogen from the forestry. So, page 55? Yeah, 35 for you, yep. So the bottom one on the right-hand side. Yeah, and you're down in there about the forestry. Tends to be, and we're talking about sediment and nitrogen from forestry trends. And it says you've got a problem for 5 years following harvesting and the new planting if they do that. So I'm assuming these crops are, 23, 28 years. So once that happens, we haven't got a problem for a while, but obviously we know the ones coming on stream. Are we solving that? How are we solving when they harvest?
Sorry, through the chair, just for clarification, are you talking about, so with in terms of the harvest cycle, it's over basically a 30-year period that the trees have grown, and as you say, as we've said in the report, that once the harvest occurs, then in terms of the effects from the harvest, it basically can occur, or do occur generally over a 5-year period in terms of, because it takes a number of years for trees to become re-established, new trees, and to stabilise land. So can I just clarify what your question actually is?
The question really was, what are we doing to solve the sediment problem if we know that's the problem, we know the timing? Have we got regulations, have we got some sort of...
So maybe I can help through the chair. So you might recall there's a new National Environmental Standard Plantation Forestry that came out a couple of years ago now. So that lifts the bar in terms of forestry operations. So we anticipate to see some improvement in the future. And also there's, you'll be aware that we're in the process of working on the draft Nelson Plan, which is going to establish freshwater standards as part of the plan process.
So question 3, Mr. Chair, so going forward, these harvesting periods, they will know what they need to do to reduce that effect on the mentioned riverways.
So through the chair again, as part of the NES plantation forestry, there's a requirement for foresters to develop forestry plans, and the council will review those plans in light of the potential impacts on water quality.
And through the chair, if I can just add also, in terms of the actual council forestry, all of the council forestry land has been assessed in terms of whether it's suitable, in terms of the location, stability and slope and erosion. So the council's actually trying to take a lead on looking at what forestry we have and how it should better manage. So that's ongoing at the moment. So that's another way that we're looking at trying to improve the effects of the environment.
Cool. Another question through you, Mr. Chair, was page, in the report, page 62, or 82. And I was interested in the water samples, elevated river flows, and the very first section under there on stormwater influence. And the monitoring sites occur during storm events, and they're likely and are likely to be caused by storm contaminants and wet weather. And you've got a very nice graph there, dare I say, that highlights when we have rain and we do our testing, we show a high level in there. So we can't stop the rain, obviously. So how do we actually take that into our samples? For example, we could have a dry year and have an A rating, or a wet year and have a B, and suddenly we're going, we should do something about it, and we could be running around in circles trying to stop the rain, or earlier on we wanted rain. It could be confusing to our figures, and therefore our obligations to meet the regulations. How are we solving that?
Through the chair, as you say, in terms of the actual issue, it's really difficult to solve, and all the councils, regional councils, are in the same position, and we're all at the moment have to follow the same sampling protocol, which is to basically set a schedule of sampling days and sample irrespective of whether it's dry or wet, unless it's from a health and safety perspective. Obviously, it's not safe to sample. So in terms of the actual sampling and how the data is analysed, that seems to change every year in terms of how we analyse and report on it. So we're still in that process as a group of regional councils. I'm on one of the steering groups for recreation bathing to look at how that's going to be improved in the coming year or two. In terms of that, the actual sampling, actual bacteria, that's also open to possible change, because in terms of to representing other pathogens, it's not actually, we found it's not actually a good indicator. So the whole monitoring program could potentially change in the next few years.
So through Mr. Chair, the reason I asked that question, that's where I thought we were heading. So I just hope we're not spending lots of money on, dare I say, making adjustments that could be solved because someone's going to use a different methodology at a later date.
Yeah, through the chair, as it stands at the moment, we still have to sample at the key recreation bathing sites, because there's a risk, obviously a risk to the public. So at the moment, this is the best that we have, and we don't really have any other options really in terms of sampling protocol.
So just through again, Mr. Chair. So did we make a note on the reports that sort of state this was a wet year, that is why we've got elevated readings, or a dry year, it's fabulous, better than last year, but probably because of that?
Yep. Through the chair, where we are reporting, as in the state of the environment report, we're trying to bring that, explain in this instance by the graph, and so it's clear why we've got elevated E. coli, and that's one of the key aspects of this report, to try and get the information out to the public. So factual information, yeah.
So another question, that's what I noticed in the report. I've got to say, feedback to you,
Yep.
Very good, it reads nice, and it is actually easy to understand for a non-technical person. That's good. The other one is page 73, our 93, at the top right side, which gives you an orange squiggly bit there in a circle, and it says fear. And we've got the score, the MCI score is 80 to 90. And then if you go to the next one, good, it starts at 100 to 119. Somewhere in there we've missed out 90 to 100. Just a small techo, but I'm sure someone will solve that.
Through the chair, thank you for that.
Yeah, the missing 10, yeah.
And through the chair, off the top of my head, it would make sense to be 80 to 100.
Yeah, I just noticed some blocks are 20, but I'm sure we'll get it right. Page 77. Again, a great report on the. Sorry, Mr. Chair, I feel as though I'm hogging this, but I'm sure everybody else will get going. The Maitai Reserve and the bio-monitoring and the dissolved oxygen. I was interested in, have we got in here any comments about the aerating oxygen into the dam, which would set as part of our budget, one of our workshops. We're looking to put a oxygen down into the dam, and I don't know, I remember it was about 500k to about 800k or something. expense to actually help solve that? Is there a note in there about what we're going to do with it in the future?
Through the chair, when the section was actually written, it was actually prior to the actual consent that's active since March the 11th, I think. But as you say, it is in the sort of long-term budget, so it could potentially be something we could add.
Through the chair, if I can just add something there, I guess the point of this is a state of the environment report at a particular time. And so, it's trying to capture what's happened at a particular time. So that might explain why that information is not in there.
Sorry, through you, Mr. Chair, I was just kind of thinking, we put these reports out and then we get people feedback, and it's kind of nice that if we show that we're actually being proactive, which I thought was kind of useful, because that algae and the high organic matter is one of the components that actually affect our filtration. So kind of nice that we're onto it.
Yeah.
And I kind of like that was a good thing for the staff. Through you, Mr. Chair, I also had just a comment on page 90 in the report, our 110. Look, I just got to say that graphic on there to show the component of the PM10 particle, just a great graphic there, just how small it is. And also I love your pie graph over the other side to show exactly what is the problem, which happens to be people's fires rather than the traffic or whatever it is. And also I like the other graphic about middle of the day stuff out to, and it just happened to be a dry day that moves some particles around, because I think it's kind of nice that we're at that level. It's easy for people, rather than complain, to actually be updated. So well done on that, I thought.
Thank you.
And other than that, to me, thanks, Mr. Chair.
Councillor Barker.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Chairman. I've got a question in relation to biosecurity. And if something detrimentally affects me, I'm looking at page 47 of the agenda, or 46 actually. If something detrimentally affects me, then I think it's probably detrimentally affecting many thousands of people who try and have a sustainable vegetable garden. And I'd like to know under which category of pests on page 46 of the agenda would the potato psyllid be in? It is affecting people's gardens terribly. And I would like to know that we've got some plan, some thoughts about what we're going to do about it.
Through the chair, that's not my expert field, and we'll bring back that information for you. Actually, I can't answer that today, and I don't think there's anyone in the room that could.
And likewise, it's disappointing to see that we've lost the battle, it looks like, with the Argentinians. They're winning. Is there any solution for them in the future, Mr. Chairman?
Well, it was one that was considered as part of the regional pest management strategy, but they're so widespread, it requires, the opportunity to do something about the spread of Argentine ants was several years ago. The opportunity has passed. So it's really down to the individual property owner to provide the...
A lot of property owners do try and manage their own place, but you clean them up and they come back.
Yeah, it was a problem with swapping plants, swapping pots.
They travel on people's clothes, so... Yeah.
But anyway, the opportunity is passed. It's lost.
Yeah, they do. They do.
Any other questions? Someone to move the recommendation? Yeah, Councillor Delberg, seconded Councillor Walker. Any discussion? Just like to compliment the officers. Oh, Your Worship.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I just wanted to perhaps just provide a little bit more context in relation to Councillor Delberg's question, so just in terms of this report and the platform through the monitoring, actually the steps the council are taking, the questions around forestry. having just had the Forestry Advisory Group meeting this morning, which Councillor Ackland was also attending, the steps that we're taking in terms of our forest very much align with the direction of the NES, and in terms of our harvest management practices, you're going to be seeing some changes come through, including one of the factors we looked at this morning is construction of bridges, so that no longer do forest to vehicles traverse through watercourses, creating the sedimentation issues that come from that activity with obviously the tyres of the vehicles, carrying sediment into the river or streams. So that's quite a significant change. Those sorts of actions, this one of the options we're looking at this morning is around $250,000 to invest in that structure. There are some benefits around that, of course, in terms of being able to harvest over a greater number of days and not being cut off when we have high rainfall events. So as well as environmental benefits, there are actually benefits in terms of the methodology. But I'd also just note that the council has committed to becoming an accredited, following our going through the accreditation process for Forestry Stewardship Council, which is an internationally recognised accreditation. It's not an easy thing to get, but we're in the process and we've got our draft report or project report coming forward on that, and that's a accreditation process that requires our operations to be environmentally appropriate, socially beneficial and economically viable. And the standards around that are high, but we felt that was important that we were accredited. The accreditation is recognised by the WWF and many other organisations, and increasingly is becoming the gold standard for as an example of a responsible forest owner and harvester. So we're certainly taking several steps in that direction. I'd also just note in terms of the monitoring work here, and where we should see through the next process some real improvements. Not only have we made as a council quite a commitment to transitioning some of our plantation forests now through into replanting with regeneration, taking it out of harvest. We've got quite a plan that goes across the whole portfolio, but we have also been proactive in applying to central government for financial assistance for erosion-prone land, and we were successful in achieving nearly just over $1.25 million worth of Ministry for Primary Industries funding through the Hill Country Erosion Fund earlier this year, and that's going to be highly beneficial for working with private landowners, both farming, forestry, after harvest projects. So significant amount of central government funding coming in that we really welcomed, but also some good partnership projects happening through Nelson City Council. So I really value this report. We've invested a lot more money over the last 5 years in environmental monitoring, and it's not, you can have really good results if you don't take any measurement. And so that's one of the things, you can look pretty good if you never actually do the monitoring and do the measuring, or you just do a little bit of it and you can pick your best sites and only do those and report those. Well, we haven't done that. We've done far more extensive monitoring and reporting, and I think that is reflective of setting the good baseline for environmental gains. But it only works if actually you make the investment and commitment that follows the monitoring to actually then invest in the programs, and I'm pleased to see that we've got both here. So happy to support this and appreciate the quality of the report from the staff.
Just a follow-up question from me because of what the Mayor has just said about various things there. I'm very impressed with the production of and the presentation of this report in terms of a communication and a consulting device to the community. I think it's one of the best I've seen from Council, so it's really good. I would like to know, did our communications team take a part in this, or was it done purely just in this section of the Council staff?
Give Mr. Hill to answer that one.
Through the chair, I believe the communications section of Council did have quite a bit of input into the format of the report as well.
I'd have to say it was a full council team there that was from all the various parts of the environmental section, the communication. So this is not just down to one or two. It was actually a team effort right across many parts of the council organisation. So actually endorse the comments of the Mayor and others around here about what a comprehensive, thorough report it is. It's readable, it's informative, it is as a state of the environment as we are at this particular point in time.
I think it'll be appreciated because, as you say, I believe it's very easily read, very readable.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Chair. Yeah, I'm supporting this as well. And again, just following up on those comments, it's really good to see over the last couple of years, we're actually getting stuff, number one, on the workshops and from a councillor, how to read and how we can, I suppose the word is pass our recommendations on to the staff. So that's great. And if I'm the person out there reading this now, apart from the pictures are great, your graphics are good, it actually says where we're trying to get to. And it's really kind of nice because the annual plan, when at a consultation, that looked well again, as good as that, that standard. And it's highlighting really about the environmental being our number 2 for our goals, and also number 4 being our governance and the council's improvement, how we present stuff. So I think we're actually kind of nice to see this, that we are actually living up to 2 of our 4. So I say our wish list of how we want the city to go forward. So thank you to the staff on that.
Just add my voice to the accolades as well, but more specifically to how the cultural monitoring is reflected in the report. And I thought that was added value to our reports, so kia ora.
Yes, thank you through the chair. I just wanted to say well done to the staff as well. It's an excellent piece of work and really readable, and it's nice to get some snapshots of all the hard work that people have been doing over the last few years, particularly Taiwan cherry. Well, actually there's just multiple things throughout, which the fish passages, there's just so much in here which we've been actively doing for quite a significant period of time, but it's great to see the progress being made. It's also great to identify where more work needs to be done, and so thank you for preparing this, and I'm sure it will be a useful tool for many people. It's really interesting reading.
Pages 1 through 2 of the agenda. Take a report to read. Is there anything else you wish to highlight or add, or any amendments or changes?
No, just to clarify though that I'm in fact not the author of the report. The author's on a training course, I believe, but I do have some knowledge of parking matters in the city, so I'm available for questions.
Question of the officers? Councillor Barker?
Was any investigation taken out to determine if the Justice Department were prepared to pay for these extra parks?
Not that I'm aware of.
So is it reasonable to think that they should be making a contribution to taking away normal parking? Everyone else has to provide parking, so why does the Justice Department not provide it? What's the answer?
I don't think we've asked that question.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Chair. My question is, did anyone ask the Justice Department whether they fancy paying taxi chits to jurors so we haven't got a parking problem?
Through the chair, I don't think that was discussed with them, but my understanding from looking through the Ministry of Justice website is that they do that already. They do provide taxis if people want to use them.
Maybe because it's like, my understanding is that we had an approach from the courts saying that would we consider providing parking permits for jurors, particularly for after hours and extended hours.
Correct.
That was the question, and it's up to us to say, can we help them out? So we didn't get into the thing about loss of parking revenue or taxi chits or other alternatives. It's just parking permits for jurors.
I just have a question around people on jury duty. I imagine they turn up and they don't know how long they'll be there for, so that is one of the issues, that they might be parked in a 120 or a 180, but they might end up staying beyond that. So I imagine the approaches come because people are worried about getting a ticket whilst they're in the courthouse. Is that your understanding, that people don't know how long they will be on jury for?
Through the chair, people do not know. My understanding is that they are advised that they need to expect that they will be there all day.
Just one question from me. Now, this is just parking permits for Buxton Square. Is that the proposal?
That's the recommendation, yes.
Okay, thank you.
So I'm assuming the 12 parking is because there's 12 jurors.
Yes.
Thank you. And so the question being then is, some of them might walk or cycles or whatever. So is these 12 parks we're taking out, and the reason I'm going there is that area is highly under pressure. In your report you've commented, NMIT, SUTA, you've got retirement people, you've got the court system there. So how do we know they actually need the whole 12 on any given day?
Through the chair, so the proposal is for the court to manage the permits. It's highly likely that they won't need all 12. It's possible that it could be 11, 10 or even half that number if people have alternative forms of transport. But 12 would be the maximum that they would be allowed to issue at one time.
Can I just clarify, this is just a permit which someone puts in their window. We're not actually designating specific car parks to jury duty. They just put it in their window, and if they're there, then they're using it. If they're not there, then it's not, anyone can park in that car park, so we're not designating.
Through the chair, that's exactly right. And that's the same, similar to the permits which you have yourself.
With your indulgence, Mr. Chair, Brent, is there another section to the policy around reserve parking? I can see this as, apologies, I haven't got the full policy with me, but is there another part that applies to elected members of council, or is it this it? I'm just trying to do a sort of comparison. Do you know?
Through the chair, yeah, it is certainly bigger than this, the parking policy. Although, if we look at that part 3.3.
Yeah, that's what I was looking at.
0.1, councillors, mayor. So that bit of it is the one which I think you're referring to,
yes.
The Nelson City councillors.
Yes, I was, and it's just consequential, Mr. Chair, that with the drafting there with the bullet points, the poor old mayor of Nelson City Council doesn't get included, but the mayor of Tasman District does. I do think we just a wee bit sad, but never mind. Maybe they can get it. So I'm hoping I won't get. Yeah, no, that's actually right. Doesn't affect one person. I just note there's no sort of areas where it's not an area. There must be something else that describes the areas. If it's somewhere else in the policy, I presume. Otherwise, it's a kind of free for all throughout the city, which would be terribly wonderful, but that certainly hasn't been the advice that I've been given previously. But we can look at that later, Mr. Chair. Thank you. I just did note in the drafting that if you will be prepared to do a minor tidy up, you could do it at the same time, and maybe just, you know.
Some through road recommendations. I'll move it. Someone second. There's a discussion, debate.
Thank you to allow me to indulge, Mr. Chair. I'm not a member of the committee, and I appreciate it. This issue was raised with me as a Justice of the Peace when I was doing my courthouse work some time ago. And I think the reasons outlined from 5.4 down cover the situation extremely well. There was an incident somewhere along the line where a certain female juror was leaving late and she met some friends of those who were standing in the dock and felt very uncomfortable about it. They do provide security for some jurors that are parked miles away because they don't want to get a ticket. And that safety concern was raised, and I agreed entirely with them. And all the rest of the issues that I think Brent's covered extremely well. I know it's compulsory to be on a jury. You have to have a pretty good excuse not to, and we've all dreamt them up over the years. But at the end of the day, you don't make a fortune, but you have to do your duty. And I think we as the city should extend at least some comfort to those jurors. They're not every day. Councillor Ackland knows better than any how the system works. I had to ask him some questions this morning about it. It doesn't happen every day, and sometimes, as I was informed, they may get two, but everything's how it is. The idea is that they'll be issued with 12. I think they probably need a couple of extras just in case someone puts it in their back pocket and goes home and forgets all about it. And they'll be managed by number or whatever. They will not be identified with the Justice logo or NCC, so that there's no possible issue with it. How that's managed and how it's drawn up will be with Brent and his team, and the courthouse will put them out and the courthouse will retrieve them after the jury service is finished. It's not complicated, it's just that we don't have to do that, and that's very good. But I think that as a city, I think we should be able to assist our citizens in whatever way we can to perform a duty on behalf of their community. So I brought it back here, and we've been working on it quietly in the background until today. And I just think it's sensible. So that's how it started.
I think it is reasonable. The only problem I have with it now, after very worthwhile discussion, is that what it is providing is free parking in Buxton Square. Because it's limited simply to Buxton Square, if you look at page 142. And that has implications, but I think it's provided the jurors are able to get to Buxton Square, well, I guess we can forego the cost of doing it. As a person who's been called up several times to the jury and never been accepted, I wouldn't take that. People like that. Yeah, no, I won't say anything. The hassle is for the 100 or so people that all come at the same time. It's a huge, huge number of people. That's where the parking problem exists, really. I'll support it.
Mr Chair, just a question, I'm sorry to come back to this. When I'm looking at the attachment on page 141 and 142, there is there's track changing that goes beyond the issue of jurors. So it looks like it's tidying up of wording to bring things up to date, no longer talking about executive team members, but senior leadership team members. Am I correct in that as part of the change, that it does go beyond just the issue of jurors?
If you look at the recommendation to council, parking policy be amended to include jurors attending. So it was a tidy up plus, while we're tidying up, including the jurors. So you see the other ones are changed, basically instead of administrative advisors, government advisors, instead of the executive team, it's senior leadership team.
Okay. So if we're doing that second one too, if we're doing that tidy up, then in that case, could we please just make the change that it's Nelson City, just for, we might as well do this at the same time, that bullet point should read Nelson City Council elected members, just to, cover everybody, like tidy, if that's possible. And the other thing I just raise at this point is that I would like to think that if you are appointed to councils committees or subcommittees that you also have the opportunity to get a parking permit to deal with matters. So I presume that that is authorised by the Group Manager Environmental Management, that's how that happens. But within this policy, there is no guidance as to on what criteria the Group Manager would authorise. And I have to say, from a policy context, that's a bit untidy. It's probably not a major, but I'm just wondering, therefore, I'm sorry, I may be set out there and I've missed it. It's about demonstrating a need, so you can talk about that, and particularly, outweighs the public. But I wonder in that case why it was that the Group Manager couldn't authorise the jurors, why it had to come here. So I'm just trying to understand it from I see this as a 2002 policy, I think. So I'm just from a drafting perspective, from a policy context, just asking those questions as to, I guess, firstly, can we do some other tidy ups while we're here? And secondly, given there's, a little paragraph at the start of reserve parking about the context, but the authorisation process, I presume, is informed by that first paragraph, in which case I have to wonder why it needed to come here. So it's a bit roundabout, and I'm sure there's a reason.
I might be able to answer that question through the chair. If you, the very last, in that part 3.3.1, says, and may only be used whilst on council business. So that limits it.
It's very helpful.
Right. I've got Councillor Delberg, then Councillor Fulton, then you've already spoken.
Well, just a comment to I believe that the delegation manual, most of these things, we don't see them at all. They're done under delegation by staff. And it's unusual for this one to come here.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Chair. Yeah, I'm agreement with the Mayor here. If you actually do change that to elected members, that takes care of the Mayor. What it doesn't take care of is the 3 non-elected that come on committees.
I suggest we use the words Nelson City Council elected appointed members.
Okay, thank you. And while we're in that box, I was also asked to, on behalf of the Sister City Committee people, it's about 3 of them that turn up, they also have a small challenge. That probably can be covered under the others, but these people do turn up here and actually are on our committees. So maybe some wording around that would be useful.
Yeah, well, we could look at that, but I'm not really now is probably not the time or the place to start amending a policy. I think for that case, it allows a parking permit for a visitor on official business. Will probably cover. The discretion is with the Group Manager, Environmental Management, has the discretion to issue a permit if needed. I think that's sufficiently covered. But with the amendment is that Nelson City Councillors elected and appointed members. What's the amendment?
I just wondered why TDC elected members isn't included. I understood that there was a reciprocal arrangement when they come to meetings here, they park here for free too. So
They often bring council TDC vehicles too. And they're also covered by official business.
And they'll be people who do this.
I understand that they're here on council business, but I'm just surprised that it's not, that says the Chief Executive and Mayor of TDC, doesn't say. I wonder if that needs a tidy up as well.
Well,
so it's quite clear.
I'm not really into, debating a policy, what's in and out is going to be rather time consuming. I think if that's an issue, we can refer it back and bring an amendment, but editing on the hop, I don't think is a good use of government's time.
Well, through the chair, why don't we just, I think you moved it and I seconded it, why don't we just approve and why don't we just change it slightly, to the recommendation slightly to say approves amendments?
Well, the one I've got is Nelson City Council elected and appointed members. It's probably the only amendment, which covers the Mayor and our appointed members, of which we have 3.
Has been
So how did TDC elected members get a parking permit currently? They'll be fine.
Much the same way as they provide parking for us when we go out to Richmond. Yeah, we park on the street and we take our chances.
Through the chair, I did follow up on that, and we were told that if we parked within the TDC car park, we were covered without our parking permit covers us out there in the same way their parking permit covers us here. So it should be worded within the policy.
Jurors and the other members as per there, but it's been moved by me, seconded by Councillor Fulton. Any other discussion or debate? There be none, I'll put it. Those in favour will say aye. Against, carried. On to the next item of business is the Navigation Safety Bylaw, item 9, pages 143 to 218. I think we've got Mr. Ramage, Mr. Francis, and you are? Are you Amanda?
If I can just indulge from it, Mr. Chair. Adrian Ramage is our new team leader resource consent. I think he's got quite a bit of experience at Palmerston North and Porirua councils. How long have you been here now, Adrian? 12, yeah, okay.
Fourth week? Oh, you'll be all over this then. And Mr. Francis and Ms. Coombs. Okay, we'll take it the report has been read, has been circulated. Any amendments or anything you want to highlight? There's a couple of matters there that I think are quite significant changes in terms of the bylaw.
Dave Duncan and Amanda Kerr, Harbour Master and Deputy Harbour Master, they're here to, because they played a key role in the review, they're here to answer any or help with any questions you might have. Just a couple of things to add. Within the report, Ms Bishop had referred to that a summary of the proposal had been sent out to the various clubs in mid-March, inviting their feedback prior to the formal consultation process. And that she said there'd be a verbal update as part of this presentation. So there has been one response in that time that's been received from the Tasman Bay Cruising Club. They have a concern about the proposal for the registration of recreational vessels with the owner's name and contact details. They see it as an unnecessary imposition, both as a signage requirement, because there's an option of either putting your trailer registration on your boat, or to have the name of the boat and the name gets registered with your details with the council. And they see that also having likely costs that would be an imposition. They also said that they considered any vessels that appear in the New Zealand Yachting Register should be exempt, which would exempt any vessel with a sail number. So Ms Bishop had written to the club in response to that, just letting them know that there is no proposal to charge for registration. And that the current bylaw already exempts the type of sailing vessels that they've described, and this should continue to apply. The only other matter to bring to your attention was I'd circulated to the governance advisor a plan of the proposed cruise ship mooring area, which wasn't ready in time for the agenda, so that should have been circulated hopefully.
See, so we're talking about this up here, is it the mooring area?
Yes,
okay then, thanks Mr Ramage. So opportunity to ask questions from any of the officers. Councillor Walker.
Thank you. Through you, just a bit of a query as to the practicality. If you go to page 48, 2.28, and it's talking about requirement to carry two forms of communication. At least one must be able to operate in the water. And that's also referred to again on page 157, item E there. Is that what it really means? I mean, are you talking of a waterproof VHF or something, are you?
Through the chair, if I may answer that, with certain vessel sizes, yes, that's exactly what we are talking about, either a mobile cell phone, which is waterproof, which most of the modern ones are, or a VHF waterproof radio. What we've learned from experience here in the last 10 years is that in the event of an incident, and there have been some that have been quite serious, the only communication that saved the person's lives was the mobile cell phone that was waterproof, or in a waterproof bag, so that's quite acceptable, or a handheld VHF, because once a vessel's overturned, then the VHF is unable to, the fixed VHF is unable to be used.
So you said for certain vessels, is that sort of mentioned anywhere, or have I missed it in an earlier bit? Because I'm thinking here of paddleboards, canoes, things like that.
Through the chair, thank you very much for that clarification. And yes, one of the things I did want to clarify today was that we don't actually see it being very practical for paddleboarders having to carry two forms of communication. We would certainly like them to carry one, which may even be as simple as a flare. But certainly in the instance of a kayak or a paddleboard, we would like to clarify that they would be an exception to this. So
windsurfers, kite surfers, that sort of thing.
Yes, exactly.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks. Yep, I was looking at the same area that Councillor Walker has looked at, and I've gone to the definition of a vessel, which is on page 173, and this I have a difficulty in deciphering what it means. Vessel means every description of boat or vessel used in navigation, whether or not it is meant to propulsion. What does that mean? If I'm out in my fishing kayak, am I in navigation? Is it in a navigable area? Is that what it means?
Through the chair, yes, exactly that. If you are in your kayak in a navigable area, then you are in the process of navigating that area. And whether that be at Tahuna Beach or through the haven or the main channel of the port or up at Malako, you are navigating that navigable area, navigable waters.
Okay, well, Mr. Chairman, I don't think an ordinary person would appreciate what it means. What do you mean? In any vessel operating in a navigable area.
Through the chair, I'm quite happy, sir, with any recommendations. Thank you.
Just to make clear.
Yeah, the more we can simplify this, I think the better we are.
Yep.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Yeah, page of our 148, but it's, I think it must reference as 2.27, which is the nominated person in charge of the vessel. I want to go into that. Would this vary when we say we've got the boat sitting there, whatever it is, and we're nominating the person? So how do I go about nominating the person apart from the person who owns it and sitting behind the wheel?
Well, through the chair, thank you, sir. It's another good question because what we have learned is fewer than 40% of people in the waterways have education in the form of a day skipper course or boatmaster course or that sort of thing. So if you own the vessel, however you learn that you have a master foreign going on the vessel, you may make him the responsible person for the day, or if you have a boatmaster qualified person on a vessel, you may choose as the owner to make him the responsible skipper for the day. But otherwise, we would see it by default referring to the owner, unless they've appointed somebody else.
So through Mr. Chair, I was interested in this point, because I think I want to get down to what's the person responsible for. So, so you're on the boat and we nominate person B, and then the boat goes down. Where's the register that, like, before we all got in, B, because B says it wasn't me, I was looking somewhere else, and it was actually see. So is it like written down? And when we say the person's responsible, obviously for something not good, what happens to them?
Through the chair, sir, in the event of an incident which may involve death or injury, that may then involve police. And should the police be involved, it would be the police that would be, who would be required to establish who was the person responsible, or the nominated skipper of the day. And in the event of an injury or accident, it's very rare, I think, that people try to abrogate their responsibilities to somebody else, or try to deny that the process occurred. It is normally when the harbour master turns up in the harbour master's boat and asks who's the skipper today, they point fingers in all four directions of the four people on board. But no, you know, we establish quite quickly in our experience who the skipper is, and as I say, if the skipper's not clearly identified, then we take it back to the owner.
Yeah, so just through Mr. Chair, I'm kind of getting, that's what I come to the conclusion. Mm-hmm. But now you're adding a requirement to nominate someone, it's not written down. I'm kind of, one of those things to me, it sounds good, but unless you're going to write it on the skipper's log, or you know, it's easier if you're on a plane because you know who's there and you know who's signing off the flight plan. But most of the boaties just go wherever the fish is or whatever it is. So I'm leaving that to you. I just kind of seen it and I thought, well, is that really going to work?
No, through the chairman again, and thank you. Yes, it is a possible area of excuse or escape for the nominated person on the day, but as I say, we've always got the owner to refer to, and
But through again, Mr. Chair, just, on that same page 3.3, I'm not too sure if the wording's right. It just says, talking about a bylaw and gazetting infringement requirements and determine, is this about the consumption of alcohol? The clause was able to be enforced under the bylaw. I wasn't quite sure that wording, so it's our page 148. But should that be unable?
through the chairman, yes, thank you, and I quite agree with you. I was going to also raise that this morning, is that we believe that should be not able to be enforced, and because we don't see how we could enforce a something which is against the national, I forgot the terminology, but national standard, if you like. So we do see it being unable to be enforced by ourselves.
Well, because I was reading that, it didn't make sense, but that does now. I'll leave that to you to adjust it. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you, through the chair. I've just got a couple of follow-up questions from other councillors' questions. With regards to Councillor Walker asked a question around adding a requirement to carry two forms of communication, and you said that you weren't intending stand-up paddle boards. Have you got that clearly written within the policy at the moment? I couldn't see the words, because you have exemptions for part on page 156 of my agenda, which is part, you have the reasons for the proposal, part A. You have current exemptions to wearing life jackets, but you don't have a current exemptions for the two forms of communication, or do you have that somewhere else?
Through the chairman, thank you very much, councillor, for the question. And it was only, was today Thursday? It was only Tuesday. We actually referred those exceptions back to the council, so they will come through in the final review. But I'm afraid that they didn't come through in time to come into this report.
Okay, I understand. So that's why we can't see them yet. So they're coming through. With regards to this map we've just been handed out, you've got a total exclusion zone. I'm not clear who's being excluded from that zone. Is it saying that all, what specifically does that mean?
Through the chair, again, that total exclusion zone only comes into force for any vessels over 300 gross registered tonnes or more. Well, that's for Tally's biggest fishing vessels and then big ships up. And that is for any vessel to be in the cut or in that total. Every other vessel other than that ship must be away or outside that total exclusion zone.
Oh, so it's not 24/7, it's just when those ships are coming through?
No, it's only during commercial shipping.
You can still paddleboard around Hawlisher Island?
Through the chair, yes, of course.
Okay, I just wanted to double check that I know that you have huge issues with big ships and little boats, and we want to work with everyone. Is anywhere jet skis totally excluded from?
Through the chair,
Can we just exclude them from the whole day?
it's a commonly asked question and a particularly argued subject. However, I believe, like motorbikes on the road, they have a right to be in certain places and they've got a right to obey the rules. And the national rules are pretty clear for them where they can go over 5 knots, where they should speed and so on. And so we treat them accordingly. And fortunately for us in this region, we get good respect from the jet skis and the jet ski clubs. So we don't normally have a second offender. We do, however, talk to people for the first time.
Great, thank you. So in terms of the rowing, waka and kayak zone area sort of around the harbour front, is that intended that they will have priority over, say, jet skis in that area there?
Through the chair, yes, exactly that. It's a preferential zoning, so whilst it doesn't exclude the jet skier, when the waka or the rower is in the region, the waka or rower can ask for the jet skier to ask the jet skier to vacate the area, and they do, or normally we're on the phone and we go and educate.
Okay, have you considered doing something like that around Hawlishaw Island for stand-up paddle boards, that kind of thing? Because that seems to be quite a used route for stand-up paddle boards at the moment.
Through the chair, yes it is. It's a very popular route and it's only a problem for us during commercial shipping. And however, we don't normally see the conflict with the jet skis and paddle boarders and that sort of thing. However, just commercial shipping. So we do have an excellent relationship with those charter board people in Tahuna Beach, the companies that do that, and they're very good for us in that education process.
Okay, and I have one more question through the chair. With regards to wearing life jackets, I can't remember if stand-up paddle boards have an ankle strap or not. Do they have an ankle strap?
Through the chair, yes they do.
So they're currently exempt, but there is an encouragement that they'll carry a life jacket around their waist. It might not be worn, but I have noticed that they give you a clip-on life jacket which you clip around your waist. Is that going to be compulsory, or is the fact that you have the leg rope to the board sufficient?
Through the chair, if I may, under the bylaw currently the leg rope to the board is a requirement. It's the life jacket is the extra requirement, but the belt jacket you refer to is perfectly adequate. So for explanation for everybody, it is a life jacket encompassed in a belt, and then if it's required, you simply unzip it, pop it over your head and inflate it, and it's a fully serviceable life jacket meeting Maritime New Zealand standards, and whilst they are becoming cheaper all the time, certainly again those suppliers that we talk about, the charter people to Tahuna Beach, they are in total agreement with us that they are a compliant life jacket. There is one which is a small thin sausage, which should be used in a swimming pool and if there, and so they have taken those off the market now and have agreed with us to supply the life jackets with a belt or a fixed PFD as opposed to a life jacket.
So where you say the wearing of life jackets, that one around the waist is sufficient?
It's quite sufficient, yes.
Okay, thank you for clarifying that.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Chair, through you. I sort of share a couple of the sort of queries about the ambiguities in it, and just what you've been saying about the exceptions and things. It's good to hear that obviously there's a bit more to it than what you can read on face value. Like every vessel sounds like, oh, hang on, every vessel's got to have. I just wonder whether that means that perhaps it's a bit of an early stage to be going out to public consultation if it's a bit unclear still, because I suppose people's reaction could easily be, I guess my gut instinct is, you can incur infringement notices as a result of not complying with the bylaw. I just wonder whether it should also go through legal just to make sure that we're getting rid of a lot of the ambiguity and stuff. It might not be a question for you guys actually, it's probably more a question for the Chief Executive.
I might be able to help there, through the chair. My understanding is this has been through a preliminary legal review. And the other thing to bear in mind, this is a document to go out for an SCP process. And the other thing is that the bylaw expires, I think, on the 2nd of December, so delays in getting this out might be problematic in terms of being able to achieve that timeframe.
Oh, okay, that's helpful to know there are time pressures. Okay, if I can just sort of, I guess when I cast my eye over it and I hear, you know, there's a means of communication that must be able to be used in the water, for me that suggests if you come off the boat and you're in the water, you've got to be able to use this device, this communication device. But I heard you say that it could be yourself in a waterproof bag, for instance. Is that right? Is that a waterproof device that can be used in the water? You've just got to tread water and make sure that you're out so that you can, okay. I mean, it seems extraordinary a bit to me that it's a waterproof device, but I've just got I do have some reservations about it going up, particularly if there are exceptions where it's not clear. And around those definitions, vessels is a very broad category of definition, but then you do particularise in those definitions sailboards and other recreational boats and things that have subcategories, and it just sort of increases sort of ambiguity as to what we're actually meaning. My preference would be for actually all of these things to be ironed out before we go out to the public, if not only to make sure that we don't get all these submissions telling us to suck eggs on the things we already know, because that's the risk. Everyone's just going to come and say, oh, these things don't make sense, which we already know, and we're going out just to find out what we already know.
Through the chair, if I may, sir, I appreciate your comments and I do share your concerns, because we certainly don't want to be going public with something that's going to be objected to over a minor point, which is you know, we think should be quite clear. So, you know, and this is where my ignorance of your process comes from, I'm afraid, that I would ask that we are able to define these things, because we've only recently picked some of this up ourselves. We've only, we also, one other, on a personal note, I had some feedback from the from the paddleboard supplier in Tuhunanui Beach. We clarified those things for him in exactly the same way as I have for you today, and so we do see, and I quite agree with you, that we'd like those things clarified. So I would like to recommend, if we can, that we continue with this process to go to public consultation once those definitions have been completed.
Well, that's helpful, thanks. Yeah, I think we're on the same page then. I mean, I know the time pressures, but you've got to get it right if there's a infringement consequence potentially, because, you know, you can exploit all sorts of ambiguity if you want to. Just the other thing, the alternative is, of course, we just backtrack from that entirely and just say we'll bring it up to date consistent with the current requirements that have come in force rather than all the extra bits. It's not clear to me exactly what is being changed to update, like I think it's life jackets for vessels over a certain size and under a certain size, and the other one on registration. I think they were the only two, it sounds like, are the ones that are needed because of regulatory changes.
Through the chairman, yes, that's exactly right. Not so much regulatory changes either. I must clarify. The recommendation from us is that all people in vessels under 6 metres wear their life jackets rather than carry them, and that is a change from the existing bylaw. And also that vessels be registered, which is a change from the existing bylaw. So the rest of it is just a clarification or a improvement on the wording of the existing bylaw.
Oh, okay. I might have misunderstood just the background to it, but that's fine. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chairman. Page 204, you've got a map, waters within Nelson Harbour, and there's a dark blue quadrant there with a blip on the western side of it. What's the significance of that? Because I think it's in open water, isn't it? Or
I think, is that where the dredgings are dumped?
Through the chair, no, thank you. That's the, that looks to me like where the northern cardinal mark beacon is, which is where the, which is
too far north.
where the harbour goes to. So we go out the cut and we turn in a northerly direction, and
That's where the beacon is.
the beacon is at that little blip.
Okay. Thank you. No, from my recall, it seemed to be too far north for that, but that'll be more correct than me.
Is that it, Councillor Morgan?
Yep.
Your Worship?
Mr Chair, just a couple of things of clarification. So when we come to the, Dave, the change around life jackets, there's some commentary in the report on page 147, which I'm not sure if you've got that, but anyway, I've talked to you. It just talks about the argument for wearing of life jackets, but there's commentary that at least 8 regional or district councils already have a bylaw requiring the wearing of a life jacket. Can you tell us what our neighbours do, both Marlborough and Tasman? What's the situation there?
Tasman District Council require you to carry the life jackets. Marlborough District Council require you to wear the life jackets.
And, okay, that's fine. So, some variation. Do you see do you think there's going to be an issue around variation given the arbitrary line between Nelson and Tasman? It gets even harder once you get on the blue stuff.
That's a good question. As has been the practice in the last 5 to 10 years, our driver's education, not enforcement. However, within Nelson region, for the regional council, which is where it is unclear as to whether you're in the Nelson waters or the Tasman District Council waters. I do know that the Tasman District Council reviewed their bylaws recently, and they regret not making their life jackets compulsory to be worn, or certainly the harbour master does. And so for us, I don't believe there'll be any confusion or vagaries. I think when people are in our waters, they are generally launching vessels at our ramps, and that's either at Monaco or at Ackerston Street. And I think the signage can be quite clear there that life jackets are required to be worn, as is the case for signage gone up recently.
All right, I'm just imagining it's not going out, it's coming back, and we're on our way back, and we get over the line from TDC into NCC, and the life jacket's been off, and everyone's been having a lovely day, and then they're out at sea, sort of putting them on again. So I'm just wondering around this, because this is one of these things where inconsistencies across boundaries do us no favours for anybody, whether there's been any approach to TDC to see whether they'll be prepared to, I know they've just gone through the process, but whether they, given the Harbour Master's feedback to you, whether they would be prepared to, review this again to bring it into a consistent line.
Through the chair, we would certainly welcome such an approach. I don't know how that's made, but certainly we would welcome such an approach.
Mr Chair, I think it's probably something that we would just want to follow up, and certainly there's going to have to be some really good communication, and perhaps what we'd be asking for is, obviously doing these reviews is somewhat time consuming for bylaws, but maybe there's a real push on the voluntary messaging and the good water safety messaging across this coming summer, that just a reminder that depending on what happens through the SCP, obviously there may be some decisions to go no, get a feedback from our community saying no, don't go with this, but let's suppose it is goes through and we consult and confirm what's recommended here, then I think we are going to have a good publicity campaign across boundary just to deal with that. Look, just the other things that you've raised in terms of changes around registration of vehicles, and I just wonder if you could talk us through that a little bit in terms of why that hasn't happened previously, and what the actual process is going to be around that, and other costs set out in this bylaw.
Through the chair, Your Worship, I'm guessing, I'm afraid. We've experienced that the current bylaw says vessels must be identified, and we've experienced several vessels that are either insufficiently identified or the vessel changes hands, and the past owner no longer knows who the current owner is, or where the current owner is, and so on, the ones that we know of. So for the purpose of search and rescue, we believe that the registration will be valuable. For the purpose of infringement, because we don't intend to become the police chasing through marinas and chasing through restricted waters to identify somebody, but with a photograph at the ramp or whatever that is a facility available to us now, we can then identify somebody. We believe that will be valuable to us, and we don't believe that people should have to pay for this registration. We do know it will be an onus to the council. However, I'm afraid I don't know how big an onus at this point in time. I'm guessing at that.
Can I just, through Mr Chair, just understand the practicality of what's being proposed? So I'm looking at sort of 2.26 of the proposed, or the bylaw as amended, and we're talking either of probably the trailer registration number or a name, and if not those, then you've got to have something registered with a harbour master. So let's say I guess first question is, what does Marlborough do and what does Tasman do? Do they have a similar system? Again, for consistency.
Through the Chair, Your Worship, I believe, again, Marlborough does require registration. I don't believe Tasman does require registration.
Okay, so I've launched my boat at Motueka and I've decided I'm going to do a pop across to Nelson City for lunch for the afternoon, up to D'Urville Island, and how are we going to manage that one?
Well, fortunately for me, through the Chair, Your Worship, D'Urville Island's not in my jurisdiction, so however, if they went to Cape Susie or south, then so to be pedantic, again, it's about education, Your Worship, not anything else for us. But in the event of an incident, certainly search and rescue. We had an incident where a boat upturned off Cable Bay. The occupants of the vessel swam ashore. They then went home. The police were notified. The search and rescue people were all notified. There was considerable expense and quite a number of resources looking for the two people. And it wasn't until the individuals got back to their home in Brightwater, one of them thought, perhaps we should call the police and let them know we've lost our boat. And it was then that the police put two and two together and cancelled a helicopter, cancelled search and rescue people, cancelled ourselves. And so for that purpose, a simple identification and registration would have saved a lot of time and money.
Through Mr Chair, and I can see all the reasons why, and I'm just going, whenever we write rules and regulations, the part that I think about is implementation. And because every time you write them, there is a process that has to follow with that, and it's whether it costs money. If it doesn't cost money, it costs time, or usually it costs both. So I just would really encourage there's some thinking through of actually practically what is somebody going to have to do to be on a register. If they're going to register with the harbour master, our harbour master, assistant harbour master, going to be, or some, university students going to be standing at the boat ramp to capture and actually, do it online, or whatever's going to happen. And that might sound like getting down into the rats and mice of this, but actually practically there's got to be something that's going to work. I share Councillor Eklund's hesitation before in relation to what we've got in front of us today, and I particularly when I heard before from the harbour master that the exceptions are still not here, and I don't see how we can approve this today without having everything here. So what are the exceptions that haven't arrived from officers yet? I mean, how do you put something out? Because it's the very first question I had when I looked at the change, that the two big significant changes are the ones that Dave's identified, registration and life jackets. And the one around life jackets has got in brackets about, this exceptions. Well, everyone's going to want to know what they are. And I think good governance would say we should know what they are today before we send this out on an SCP. So I guess that's a question for you, Mr Hill. So just in terms of, are they here? And if they're not here, how do we get them here? It's obviously, I think, a recommendation to council, although I'm loath to catch things up at the council because the council meetings are very long and tend to be rather tedious at the moment. Trying would even be a good description.
Have a response?
Oh, well, through the chair, what we're proposing is that any minor corrections are approved by the chairs or the chief executive, but I guess the question you're raising is whether they're minor and whether it's substantial and whether we need to address this before this goes out, but possibly between now and when this goes to council. I just want to clarify if that's what you're seeking.
Well, through you, Mr Chair, what I'm conscious of is there is a time frame around this, so we've got to get it through in a reasonable sort of sense of time. But equally, this is of the bylaws that we have, along with parking, this is actually one that affects a lot of people, and they have a real interest in it, and I don't really want to get a whole lot of submissions, as Councillor Eklund said, telling us how to suck eggs. It's actually, but for actually sitting down and making sure we put it all together, we could save people a lot of time. It's incredibly frustrating having to write submissions on bylaws that, aren't in plain English that you can't follow, or there's a piece of material missing. So I think we have an obligation to the public to put out a document that is concise, readable and complete. And I'm really loath to do anything other. So I think that, and I'm just not convinced that would be seen as that's a judgment call. I don't think that's a minor change or correction. So I think you're going to either have to sort it out and note that that'll be coming to council, which is less than ideal. But if you feel the time is tight and you can't wait for another cycle of the P&R committee, then I don't think you've got any other choice. The second thing, just and final thing, Mr Chair, is Ms Hill, you talked about you'd had preliminary legal advice. Was that, and what I'm hearing from the Harbour Master is that this has been a pretty movable feast right up till it's coming in today or through the reporting process, Tuesday. Was that preliminary legal advice, once all of that material had come in, and actually in the case of an SCP and a bylaw, I don't really want preliminary advice, I want advice. So it's just a question of, does this need to go back for a legal review before we see it at council?
Through the chair, certainly we could ensure that happens before it comes back to council.
What are you proposing, Madam Mayor, is that when's the next P&R committee? It's about
end of May. 28th of May.
something like that.
Through the chair, 28th of May.
28th of May. What's the timeline to get this back? When's the bylaw expires?
Through the chair, sorry, 2nd December 2019, and so for me personally, I have some accord with Her Worship the Mayor and the councillors that would like these definitions and exclusions very clearly laid out. I think we could do that quite quickly, but if your next meeting is the 28th of May, then certainly we'd be very keen to see that done by then. I would like to understand then, if I may ask, what would be the time frame then from that for that committee meeting to the next council meeting to complete consultation in a timely manner?
Yeah, we'll hold that thought. We'll just get some advice from the office. When's the next council?
It looks to me at the moment as if we're aiming for the last council meeting of the triennium on the 19th of September. I think that must be the last meeting, is it?
Well, through you, Mr Chair, you could have a crack at if we were really quick with our deliberations, you could go for the 4th or the 6th of June. The governance advisors, we could slide it in. We've got deliberations meetings those days, but we could potentially deal with that matter as a discrete item if it was.
Well, I tend to share the view of sort of many around the council, well, I think probably almost all of the councillors, that there are a few loose ends there that need to be tied up. Some quite fundamental issues like exemptions and stuff like that. So I'd rather we spent the time debating it properly at this committee and then putting up a reasonably complete and final product to council. So we have the debate, we've done the work at this level.
I think so.
So my view would be, there's a couple of other questions coming, but the view would really, we let this matter lie and bring it back on the 28th of May. That would be my recommendation, so. Any questions? I've got Councillor Barker and Councillor Delberg, but in light of what the proposed course of action.
Yeah, well, mine's just, Mr Duncan, I'm just a little uncomfortable having heard you speak at a Probus meeting about some safety issues, about the belt life jacket. And at that meeting you talked about board paddlers, whatever they're called, paddle boarders. If they fall off and bang their head, they need a life jacket, otherwise they'll drown. Now, if they have to undo a belt one and pull it over their head and they've already banged their head, how comfortable do you feel with the change that you're proposing?
Through the Chair, Councillor, I think it's a good question, but it begs the same question for anybody in a kayak with a simple PFD on rather than a full life jacket, or anybody water skiing or jet skiing with a PFD rather than a life jacket, and I believe that they're much more liable to hurt themselves than a paddleboarder, and it's the same risk, and it's been decided nationally that it's an acceptable risk, that type of PFD or life jacket. So whilst I tend to agree with you, it's not something that I can change other than through education, and certainly we think the education process has removed those little sausage boys which people are expected to hang on to indefinitely to something which is, as I have one myself, they're quite simple to adopt and put on, and then they are a fully fledged life jacket as opposed to a PFD.
If you're conscious.
If you're conscious, yeah. Luckily for us, we haven't struck too many unconscious paddleboarders, but we've certainly struck a number that are suffering from cold and fatigue and that sort of thing, which would be conscious enough to adopt their life jacket, even just for warmth.
So it's a national guideline we're following?
Yes, yes.
Well, in order to sort of progress this matter, I'll move a procedural motion that this matter is left to lie until the next ordinary meeting of the PNR committee, which will be the 28th of May.
You better second it, Mr Chair.
It's seconded by Worship.
And just in doing that, just as Dave and Amanda are here, just can I thank you very much for the work that you do to educate people, keep them safe and actually have an enjoyable time on the water. It's really valued. You've got a complex harbour operation to deal with down there, and we really value the work that you're doing. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. So to just look, I'm interested in the number of vessels that are impacted, and do we actually have staff resource if we become the person to register them? Have we got the staff resource and time in a budget? If that's a large number of vessels.
We're not running a register.
We're not going to do it?
No, we're not running a register. There's no.
So who's doing it?
It's a procedural motion. So it's a procedural motion, so I'm going to put it. Those in favour will say aye. Aye. Against, carried. Thanks very much. Right, next item on the agenda is the proposed dog control fees and charges, pages 219 to 223 of your agenda. Mr Edwards again.
Through the Chair, again, I'm not the author of this report, but I do have some knowledge of dog control matters.
Yeah, thanks, Edward. Essentially, this is a report to increase the dog control fees and charges, I think, with the rate of inflation. The schedule is attached, so opportunity to ask any questions. They've been done. Oh, Councillor Delberg.
Yeah, our page 223, and I was just interested in the impounding fees. And I was interested in to get first impounding, $75, second and third, but then they get I'm interested in the daily charge for each day following the impounding, $15. What does it actually cost if I was to put my dog in, I'm away on holiday? I don't think it's $15 because I know that happens to the family pet, when that goes away, it's more than $15. So what I want to know is, does the $15 actually relate to if the person had to have it in the kennel club, for example? So I want to know why we're babysitting these people for cheaper, or baby dogging these people.
Through the chair, I suspect that fee has been that since I've been around. The feedback which I get from people who have had their dog in the pound for some time is that is quite an expensive amount. But you're correct, is that occasionally we do get people who unfortunately see that as being a cheaper than the kennels. For example, over the Christmas period, if the dog ends up in the pound, they will leave their dog in the pound. That's right.
Through you, Mr. Chair, that's the point I was trying to get to. And I actually think that needs to be relating to what it costs if I've got the thing in the dog kennel. Because I know when our daughter is off on holiday, we get to babysit in Wellington. So it's reasonably expensive if you have your dog away for a week. Almost as cheap as flying two grandparents over to look after it. So let's make it relative.
Councillor Eklund.
Well, I sympathise with the position. Do those people who choose to put I don't know how it works, they just abandon their dog and eventually gets picked up by the pound, is that the idea?
Through the chair, I'm not sure if they would abandon their dog, but it's not uncommon for someone to be looking after a dog, coming and feeding it once a day or something like that, and then the dog, through whatever reason, is out wandering, ends up in the pound, and then the easiest and cheaper option is to leave the dog in the pound until such time.
By the person who's doing the feeding over the holiday period or whatever, just leaves.
Or by the owner, who's ultimately responsible.
You know, I'm just trying to work out what's being suggested. Well, I mean, like I totally empathise with it, is that increased fees to cover costs so that the market cost of a dog going into kennels is the same as the pound, right? So to discourage the behaviour of leaving a dog for the pound. But surely I don't know if you've got any stats on how many people would do that, whether it's intentional, whether it's through sort of hopeless systems they put in place while they go away. And then secondly, surely if the costs is high enough, that would just discourage someone from picking up their animal altogether. Do you know any of that? I mean, and what happens to an animal after it's in the pound for a certain amount of time? Presumably it gets compiled.
Through the chair, so the process is a dog gets impounded for whatever reason. Normally it's out wandering or secured by a member of the public who give us a call, where we'll obviously impound the animal and do our best to, if it's the first time it's out, then normally we'll do an educative approach and endeavour to get the owner to pick it up if they're around. If it's a more of a recidivist wanderer, then it'll normally end up in the pound, or if we can't contact the owner, then it'll end up in the pound. The owner will be notified by whatever means we can, ideally by the phone or email, or if not, then by way of a letter. And the law requires that we hold the dog in the pound for a minimum of 7 days if it's not claimed. And claimed means the owner comes in and pays the impounding fee. After the 7 days, then the dog technically becomes the property of the Nelson City Council for the council to deal with as they see fit as the owner. Most of the dogs are rehomed through the SPCA. We have a good arrangement with the SPCA and the ARC. If they're a nice dog, if in our opinion they aren't so nice and they aren't able to be rehomed because of their temperament, then unfortunately those dogs are euthanized.
They don't have a loving home to begin with, so they're not making a choice between kennel or pound.
Well, I didn't think we were going to spend that much time on this one, but I'm curious. The second and third impounding fees are really high. They're pretty significant. If someone's got just has done their best to secure their property, but they have a dog with a curious temperament or has managed to escape despite the owner's best work. Will you really do those fees that high? I mean, I guess some people might think, oh, it's better to leave the dog there than risk a second or third impounding. So why such high second and third fees?
Can I just through the chair, Brent, do you want to talk about if they leave their dog there, we can still recover the costs?
Okay.
Through the chair, even if the dog is left, then the Dog Control Act enables the council to send the owner an invoice. And it's not uncommon for the invoice to be many hundreds of dollars. Obviously, 200 plus for a third and subsequent impounding plus sustenance fees. Sometimes there's after hours on top of that. I won't comment on the amount we actually recover of those, but through the chair, to answer that question, I guess what the proposed fees are trying to do is keep the standard registration fee down to a reasonable level, and for those who actually use the dog control service to be paying for it.
User pays.
But my question is, so assuming a user pays us $75 for the first impounding, if someone's already paid $75 and then their dog is impounded again, it's $150, is that right?
That's right.
So why is it significantly more? It seems more to be punitive to me.
Yes, it is. Yeah, through the chair, absolutely. That's the intention of it is to provide some more incentive to address the issues. So
and is that within a 1 week period or a 6 month period or a 2 year period? If your dog gets impounded for a second time, when does it be defined as a second time?
Within 1 year.
The second time, that's quite clear. What we're talking about, if the dog is impounded once.
Oh, and any 12-month period. So,
12-month period.
So someone could 9 months later have their dog impounded again and they have to pay $150 instead.
Yes.
That seems fairly steep to me for some dog owners, quite significant. Is that really user pays?
Through the chair, that's what's being proposed and that's what's currently happening. I will clarify that we do apply discretion as well in circumstances, let's say if it's 11 months, etc. And there's, you can normally tell the people who are in that position which you've described, where they are genuinely, I don't know how my dog's getting out.
Yeah. Okay.
If they've had the dog control officers around and they're trying to do their best to address the situation, and we certainly do apply discretion in those circumstances. But I guess one of the purposes of having the increasing fees is to make those people who wouldn't otherwise do anything to take the matter seriously.
I do appreciate that, and I can see it's a hard, so I'm glad that there is discretion allowed. I think that's important to remember, that some people are doing their best and that cost is significant for some people, whereas perhaps not significant to others.
Look, I'm actually quite happy to move the recommendation in the report, Mr. Chair. In terms of the escalating fees, I think it's really important just to remember why this is important, and it's for two reasons. It's around public safety and animal welfare. That are having a wandering dog in an urban area at night with traffic, all sorts of things going on, and having been in the scenario of having to deal with a very traumatised car driver, a fatally injured dog that was on the loose. It is a very traumatic situation, and really there is a responsibility for owners to make sure that they do use every endeavour to keep their animals secured, because the consequences of not doing so eventually, if it continues, the risk factor just goes up and up, and it's a two-way risk factor. So, this really has got an animal welfare and public safety focus on it. It's not a some sort of punitive cash collection system. It's there for very, very good reasons, and I know that the team do. They are very compassionate in the way that they approach this. The issues about hardship are recognised, in a very meaningful way. But those measures and that escalation are there for good reason, to make sure that we address those issues. Something's done about them.
Sort of moving to questions and debate. A question, Councillor Ackland?
A very quick one. Do you have any idea of how many people actually abandon the dog to the pound as opposed to paying the enforcement fees? Like as a percentage, like as a general sort of percentage that you can think of, or not really?
Oh, I couldn't give you an answer on that without doing a bit of research, but I can come back to you with that information.
Yeah, that'd be good. I mean, yeah. I mean, and maybe that's okay, but I suspect what could happen is that it'll be the toughest form of love, where they just give up the dog and then get a new one from the litter from the pack down the road, rather than going to the pound. And that's sort of almost reinforcing the exact same problem of perpetual cycle of offending.
Any other questions?
Thanks, Mr. Chair. So how many dogs do get impounded in a year?
Through the chair, it's around about one a day, on average.
So the question, that's a reasonable number. And so how many dogs would be in our daily care at $15?
Through the chair, certainly the vast majority are picked up that day or the next day. But on an average day, if I was to go to the pound, there would be 2 or 3 dogs which are currently in our care. We also have long-term guests in the pound. For example, if there's a dog attack situation and there's a prosecution in effect, then those dogs can stay in the pound while it moves through the court process, which can be some time.
And that's so through you, Mr. Chair, is that a daily charge then while we babysit?
In the case of a prosecution, technically in the law it is, yes. How much actually gets recovered? Say if a dog is in the pound for a year while it goes through the prosecution process, it's unlikely that the court would award the full costs of that.
That's not solitary confinement.
Mr. Chair, I'm just conscious that the other law-abiding dog owners and have 6,000 dogs, so we've got a lot. We're talking 360 that turn up in our pound. Obviously the vast majority are obviously loving their dog, and it's all nicely set up at home. So it's only a small number.
Much as, this is all very interesting. It's been moved by Her Worship the Mayor, both recommendations, seconded by Councillor Barker. Is there any other discussion or debate? Yeah. There being none, I'll put it. Those in favour will say aye. Aye. Against, carried. There's one last item, is building team and international accreditation, IANZ. So Mr. Brown, it's just about the accreditation for the building unit. Welcome, Mr. Brown.
Good afternoon, councillors. Just through the chair, I wanted to give a verbal update. So the IANZ accreditation is planned for June, and we have had initial instructions from IANZ to produce documentation. So just to let you know, that's coming. Post the last planning and regulatory meeting, I was just keen to outline a couple of changes that have occurred since the last time we were accredited. The main change being that IANZ have actually fully reviewed how they audit councils, and that came in about a month after we were last audited. So we will be audited under the new methodology. Now this new methodology caused a few interesting moments for some of the councils who've been accredited for it initially. They've done a bit of evolution on it, but there is a chance, because it's quite a different way of being audited, that there may be things that come out. So they've gone away from the corrective actions, and they've gone away from the strong recommendations. They now have general non-compliances and serious non-compliances. So it's really just a heads up that it's changed quite significantly. Obviously, some of the early councils were hit with significant numbers of serious non-compliances, but there was found to be issues with the way they were auditing, which has now been evolved. In short, obviously that's one of the significant changes that's happened. So we're going to go into that being it's our first time being audited, so I'm just putting it out that there's an expectation we're going to do the best we can, but we may get some of those things coming across because of the way we've been audited in the past, and they may pick up on new things. We have a project in play, and we have been producing quite a lot of work around how they're now auditing, so we're reasonably confident we've got across most of that. The second significant change is obviously we've implemented quite a big new system in, so we're still embedding with that system the Alpha One system. We know that 11 other councils have been accredited with the Alpha One system. Obviously, we're another council who's going to be accredited, hopefully, we should be, but obviously there's some work that we're doing to make sure that we're prepared for that. But again, it's a second quite significant change that's happened since we were last accredited. We have a project in place to work towards the June date, but it just wanted to give you an update on that sort of expectation around. We're obviously doing what we can to ensure we've got these things covered, but to be aware it's a different world to where we were 2 years ago. Thank you.
I understand this is your last week.
Through the chair, you are correct.
Yes, on behalf of, I think, myself and the rest of the committee and all the elected councils, thank you very, very much for the expertise and the manner, the way that you've dealt with the building control unit and the work you've done down there with the work. I know this, I think this, I know that you've done at least 2 re-accreditations with the IENS process, and we've got through those with flying colours. I think the last one we did was no recommendations, which was an extremely high bar. So on behalf of all of us, thank you very, very much for your expertise, your good humour, and the way that you've led your team down there and delivered an exemplary service to this council, to the elected members and to the community of the work you did. So thank you very, very much, Martin. And I do understand that we got you back on contract to guide through this particular project. So
yes, there will be some involvement there.
Yeah,
thank you.
But, you go with but it's a tinge of sadness. I know they put an offer to make them an offer that you can't refuse, but you managed to weasel away. But thank you very, very much, and it's a genuine thank you from me and I think the rest of the committee.
Thank you. Appreciate it.